Hi, this is Rooney207. Welcome back. For this particular episode, I wanted to cover Splinterlands, the game, and also kind of do more of a macro brain dump. This is not financial advice or anything like that. A couple folks have reached out and asked me for my thoughts on the current land situation within Splinterlands and just the economy in general, and some of my thoughts around some of the proposals and things like that. What I wanted to do is just do a quick brain dump on my thoughts and from a macro thesis perspective on the game itself. I think LAN is a mode that will probably be one of the bigger ones. And I think, however, Splinterlands decides to develop the game itself and the economy over time, I believe LAN will have its own iteration. It could grow, morph into other metaverses, and it could just be, or simply like what Yavamat said, it's just a resource management component module of Splinterlands where players may run out of things to do with their cards, especially the older players, the alpha beta cards, or cards that have stats that may not be as useful. And as the current rule sets and abilities continue to evolve, I think cards will potentially play. Certain cards will maybe its use case will diminish over time, no matter how good of a card it is. And so I think. From that perspective, I think anyone that has purchased land, obviously, and the original ones that have purchased it for $10, $20, or even the ones got them free from boxes, like people like Gank and Darkest Night and those guys, part of the OG piece. They've definitely benefited and made a lot over the course of the SPS airdrop for land. And I think as the two proposals, one by Jarvie from Peak Monster, for requiring that going forward to be compensated for the SPS airdrop to continue to receive them, they'll have to survey the land. And then the current pre-proposal from the Splinterlands team producing a structure or a path for minting program to be able to receive SPS from your land. So I think coupled with those two pieces, and then also there's very little that we know about what the actual value of the land piece. I think the safe thing we know is the number of SPS that can be minted from the 150,000 plots. So we do know that. I think it was like 6.5 million, and I think it'll diminish in June. It's going to drop to, it's a 1% drop from month to month. It'll diminish slowly, and this also forces the increase, hopefully, the kind of their own land version of the flywheel for the SPS. It'll produce that component of it. I think so. If you were fortunate to have been part of the old one, you've benefited. And then also the other piece is if you own a region or if you own a track, you're also benefiting significantly from that standpoint. If you had the foresight or the willingness to take the risk, people like Gank, Matt, Two Castle Clark, and those guys, they had the foresight to. And the willingness to commit their risk their funds to buy these regions, they're definitely benefiting from that. And then also we have the new stage of players where the RNG favors them. So folks like Aftersound, he had 3 plots. He hit one for a keep from Area 51. So I think for those folks, definitely a large congratulations to those guys, as I think. Keeps are going probably 3,500 plus, I think, for something like that for keeps, and castles have gone up significantly. So I think those guys will continue to mint significant value in return for their keeps and castles. And then I think the next potential tier will be most likely, I think the ones that have, and I think please keep in mind the fact that I'm more of a value investor. So I'm looking at it from a value investor perspective. I'm not looking to try to be the best at the land ownership game resource management tool, and I'm not looking to produce the most. I'm not trying to be the emperor of Pretoria either. So I'm not looking at it from that perspective. I think if you're looking to get the most you can and have an enjoyable experience without feeling that you've overspent within the land module piece of Splinterlands, I think the next piece will probably those that are able to acquire the common magical land plots. The common magical land plots will probably be a really good deal, I think, potentially over time they can produce because it allows you to participate in the Secret of Pretoria. So I think that that is something that could add significant value long term to the equation. The So I think maybe if you can get it under $150 per common magical land plots, and it is about patience, and also you kind of have to factor how many you're also foregoing the loss of SPS airdrops and some of the other, and then the ability to enjoy. So you kind of have to factor what is that worth to you, the opportunity costs for that. And maybe some people for that period of time, it's worth it for them to pay the current market value, which I understand from that standpoint too. It's a game element, and it's also a community where we're hanging out with a group of friends, and if it's an opportunity to buy into a region or a plot that's close to your friends or neighbors. And so I think you have to add those types of intrinsic value to the equation, not just the raw numbers, not just the actual value itself. And the so I think the common magical land will be of value over time. And then the other piece is the type of cards that go into that, because we have cards that we have to use for rank plays, for tournaments, for guild brawls, and other that lends itself to higher use case or econometrics value, the return perspective. So I think like the rare cards will probably be the most used, and has the highest use case for land. I imagine this is just me guessing and extrapolating based on the land 1.5 white paper and what Yabamat has shared within the town hall itself, and some of the chatters conversations within the map chat within Discord, and so some of the comments other folks part of that I consider part of the OG world of Splinterlands. They have a lot of foresight into it, so I think so I put more value into what they're saying too. So I think the regular rare cards, regular foil and potentially gold foil rare cards could lend a lot of value. The other component to consider is that if you're able to have 5 ruinies on top of 5 common magical land, I think that also could potentially create value as well for land. And I think land is such a long play. I don't think people have to necessarily rush out to it. And this is one of the reasons why I think Jarvie wanted people to at least survey the land to continue to receive the SPS piece, which is a fair ask, I think, in my opinion. And I'm glad it passed, and I'm glad Jarvie took the initiative to put it out there for the community's benefit. And I think long term, land will be one of the important aspects of it, and it'll be many years that it might be even 2 years before we even see land play out. But I think the fact that the Splinterlands team, they continue to time and again to take risk as well, which is one of the things that I love about what Aggie and Yamamat, their willingness to do is to take risk. And even though some projects may not necessarily be as successful as others, case in point, the Waka promo cards. But I think if we look at the history of what the founders of Splinterlands have done, is that they time and again have rewarded people who have taken risk with them and committed and have believed, put faith in them, not just from their time, but also the resources, their financial resources. And so I think the founders, Aggie and Yaba, have continued to reward those. So I think those who own these types of assets within the land play mechanism will definitely benefit. So we do know what potentially the arenas you build, the mining, the SPS, and some of the battle piece. What we can put a number on them essentially. I think the other piece we don't know is what the spells will cost, what the market value of the spells and the cards, and also I think that one of the big unknowns is the type of cards that the founders, Yaba and Nate, will want or enable the player and the ownership of the community to be able to produce. So essentially, maybe it might be years from now, but it could evolve to the state where you can actually have some creative liberty, creative rights to the type of cards and then you can get residual on it. So there can be a lot of things that can change over the course of time. So I think it's just what you feel is comfortable that you want to pay for the plot of land, the type of land you want, the type of resources, the type of community, the friendship, and the type of folks you want, your type of neighbors, and the keeps that you want to contribute to, the castles, the titles. So I think all that factors into what a player or an individual would perceive as spending for land and all the components that come with land. And I think in terms of Splinterlands, long term from a roadmap perspective, I think they're working on, I believe, their project initiatives and some of the many folds. They're currently in the age of the Minotaur, and I think they continue to strive and work towards that. They may not always meet, and in the case of land, they're 2+ years behind schedule in terms of getting it there. I think the bottom line is Web3 is new. There will be large investments, and there will be many games that will come later that will be of this nature where you have residual passive income, you have staking, you have the ability to potentially replace or subsidize or augment the current United States dividend stock model, as an example here. I think the world of gaming will continue to consume larger and larger portions of the macro GDP. So I think from that, and we can look at Citibank's latest report piece, which calls, I think they ranked gaming as the number 2 contributor piece for crypto Web3 piece of it. And you look at the Saudi Arabia's their royal family, they're putting up $38 billion into the gaming space. So I think even though relative to their actual fund size, it's relatively small, but it's a fact that more and more countries and more businesses and people are willing to commit to gaming as a sector, and then the growth of that sector where it'll basically consume lots of entertainment's area. So I think the most interesting component, I think, takeaway for me recently of just kind of thinking now I'm doing this video and kind of thinking through all the pieces that could make a large change is that I believe Web 2 games, the ones that struggle the most, the ones that fail to receive the large percentage of their revenue share, I believe they'll be the first ones to potentially consider Web3 and the crypto community, because you rather be a larger fish in a small pond versus a small fish in a big pond, basically, because at the end of the day, your Web 2 game will already struggle. There's no way that you can, and it makes no sense for you to pour additional revenue, and your investors and your board will not approve of it, or they'll probably think it's a terrible idea to put basically more bad money. But if you were to turn around and pitch them that the idea of transitioning your Web 2 games to Web 3 and add an NFT element to it, add a staking element, make it more dynamic. And I think this is where Splinterlands as a service could potentially work, and a platform like Hive could potentially be successful, is to help these. And who knows? They could be something like, the GLG or GLS piece for the Splinterlands, the sports league, or it could be just completely different as part of the different games of genres, the top 10 genres that are successful within Web 2, but the sub games within those components, their struggle. So it makes sense for them to consider something like a Web3 where they can monetize, they can share, they can create DAOs. There's a lot more features and functionality, and plus they'll be new to it. It's a great opportunity for them. In terms of what I'm trying to do, so basically, I'll have limited influence over land or even the entire Splinterlands ecosystem. But what I'm trying to do is on a regular basis to increase my SPS, because I think SPS is it could fall lower. We don't know. But I think where I'm at is I'm comfortable adding to my SPS, because over time, eventually, we'll hit the flywheel where DEC will be slightly above its par value, the peg value, and then people will burn the SPS for DEC, because eventually it may take years, but the amount of DEC in circulations, the supply will dwindle over time, and hopefully we don't have another case of DECB where the Yaba feels that he has to issue more. But it may be there may be a situation. I can't say no, because I think from an economy perspective, there's a use case for DECB and the whole voucher mechanisms. So I think over time there will be a situation where vouchers and SPS will play an important and vital role to the economy of Splinterlands, one way or another. I think it's just time, patience. So I think if you have time, you're patient, and you're willing to continue to dollar cost into SPS, and you'll get vouchers as a result of it. And over time, you'll accumulate that, and once player staking, guilds, and other aspects of the game, SPS prices will continue to, I think, inch up slowly, depending on the macro factors and where the game is. And so I think that's an important consideration aspect of it. I believe a lot of these cards, what I'm doing is the excess cards, I put them up for rental, and I take the DEC. I either improve my cards, I buy cards on the market, or I buy SPS. That's the essential two things that I do on a weekly basis with my DEC. And in terms of where Splinterlands can be, I think we don't know the impact of Soulkeep, the game, the tower defense game. Once it comes out, we'll see its impact on the number of cards that's going to be staked and the type of cards. So we'll see a slow decrease in some of these card supplies, and land will consume a certain amount of card supplies. I know a lot of people talk about we don't have enough cards, and I can see that for summoners, but I don't see that for the regular monster cards. I think there will always be the game will always produce more, but I think the specialty cards. So where I'm approaching from a value perspective, value investor perspective, is to look at opportunities within the Splinterlands ecosystem where I can potentially monetize. So one of the ways is to have a certain number of staked SPS. You can get the promo cards, hopefully on an annual basis, like Ruse, for instance. And from there, you can continue to rent some of it out, the excess, the ones that you have in excess, you can rent them out. Or if you have gold, you don't want to have create the gold BCX, you can merge them to at least level 5 because you definitely want the martyr skill set ability. So you can rent those out, and then so it's about compounding your assets over time. And I think one of Dwayne's comments show, he had talked about the ability to sell and exit. I agree with him. I think it's an important fundamental exercise. I think all investors should consider is that you you want to create this compounding effect, but at some point there's a value. Money serves a purpose for your life. It could help you in different ways, and I hope that through time, through compounding, the crypto Web3 games, such as Splinterlands, will continue to provide that for the community. And I believe there are plenty of other games right now that are kind of moving in that path, but there just aren't many successful ones. And I'll talk about them in other videos, but I found very few from that vantage point. So I think where I'm focusing on is the SPS piece, and then the card rental, getting the DEC, buying, improving my cards there, and then guild play that gets me a certain number of SPS and merits. And I think once the many players maximize their Guild Brawl cards. Maybe it'll be open later. You can stake a certain number of DECs and you can rent them. But I think at the pace that we're accumulating these Guild Brawls, it's pretty diminutive. It doesn't really have a large effect, and I can kind of show you even for my own account here for the Gladius cards. I've been playing. I don't even know how long. I kind of lost count. And you can see like where I'm at. It's I just have so few that I can even use for any of these guilds piece. I mean, I use them because I think they provide certain advantages in it, but it's just so low level compared to where I'm trying to, like, I'm playing at gold. I don't have them at the gold level. So and to be fair, I don't think many have it either, because there's probably not that many players that have been playing longer than me in terms of my account and things like that. So there's definitely a bunch of them, but there's not that many that it would be at a comparative advantage to them, where I can't overcome it with other cards in the future sets. So I think there's potential for these types, and then the Gladius, and then you have the various reward cards. And I think the game is moving to where they'll potentially be soulbound for anywhere from 1 to 2 years. So I try to look for the opportunities for these soulbound cards too. So within the soulbound cards, we have the regular foil and the gold foil. Here's an example. So we have eventually. Ideally, you want to keep the higher, or if they're equal levels, you want to keep the gold one, because the gold will produce a higher return in terms of rank play. They'll give you 10% more, and plus if it's a promo and things like that. So you definitely want, if the option is of the same value in terms of their level, for whatever league. Let's say I'm playing at Gold League, so if they're at the same level, I definitely want to keep the gold foil to play, because you'll earn more from it, and then you can rent out the regular foil. So I think one of the advantages over time is the compounding effect of these cards, and you put them out for rental, and they'll just earn you. So I think I look at that as a compounding effect of the rental system. And then also the amount of SPS you have, you'll get GLX and other ones as other tokens in the future. I think where the true value of SPS will come, it's when it's combined with your holding of the GLX token for the third game that the Splinterlands, the Steam Monster family will release, that you'll get airdrops, the annual 365-day airdrop. So I think combining those two over the compound effect of the third game that will qualify for the third token, and whenever that happens, I believe the third game will produce a parabolic return, I believe. And then after that, every continuing ones that you hold, every game that's released by Steam Monster, I think it'll continue to have that kind of asymmetric return for its holders. And this is where I think you have to consider to reduce your amount every game that they produce in terms of over time, so that you can take some out of the system to enjoy for you yourself, your family, and also to diversify into other asset class. I think it's important to consider that. But I think all wealthy people can tell you that they took a tremendous risk unless they inherited from their family. So you always want to put your pretty much all your eggs in one basket initially, and then get the return. So it has to be like kind of a home run, and then after that you diversify to minimize your risk. The I believe so. There's definitely going to be return, and then I think tournaments have limited exposure, just because I think the structure is not and Weirdbeard will work on it, but I think it's really it's not for me as a player to play tournaments, because it's just one is most of it is supported by the SPS DAO, and they're not really structured in a way that players are willing to pay. Everyone is just so used to paying small amounts and getting something, and maybe that's the direction the tournament will take. But I think without the tournament host and the SPS DAO being able to gain a profit or some kind of management fee from that experience, it'll just be more of a marketing initiative, a marketing cost for the SPS DAO, and it's hard to compete. Many of the tournaments, when we go there, they're all hosted by, pretty much the majority of them are hosted by the SPS DAO. It's very difficult to compete against, because you have the 2000 DEC, you have all the pieces that the fee structure that goes into it, and it's difficult to overcome long term. The guild play, I think, is an important aspect of the game. So, and over time, I think it'll do well. I think this is pretty much it. I think over time, I don't know how many years it'll take for DEC to be sustainable at its peg par value, but we'll see. But I just wanted to kind of talk through my thoughts on Splinterlands long term from a macro thesis perspective. And thank you so much for your time.